Henry David Thoreau, in his wonderful classic Walden, shared the following vignette. One farmer says to me, "You cannot live on vegetable food solely, for it furnishes nothing to make bones with." And so he religiously devotes a part of his day to supplying supplying his system with the raw material of bones, walking all the while he talks behind his oxen, which on vegetable-made bones jerk him and his lumbering plow along in spite of every obstacle. I could not count the number of occasions over the years of my work as a carpenter when some 250-pound, rough and ready, beer-bellied construction worker offered a critique of my vegetarian eating habits. Now, I'll be the first to admit that my way of eating is unusual, to say the least. I am known to enjoy unique combinations of food. For example, I like to make what I call refrigerator sandwiches, utilizing to full extent whatever is available. Banana sandwiches with peanut butter, pickles, and onions? Why not? Hummus with cucumber, apples, and cheese. Delicious. And I'm always willing to try a new recipe. When my mother was still alive and my family gathered frequently for special occasion meals, it got to the point where my brothers and my sisters-in-law would say, "We have it covered, Jack. You don't need to bring anything." All because I showed up once with Johnson's Temptation, a Scandinavian casserole with potatoes and anchovies. It's a classic. Even my mother liked it. My life has changed dramatically in the last 6 months. I was settling smoothly into retirement, travel, and energetically growing old. But fate and genetics had other plans. My grandmother, Alma Ford, lived to 91 years old. She grew up on a farm and lived her life in the countryside near Melrose, Florida, raising a 140-acre citrus grove. I had always considered her way of eating to be ideal. Whole foods, milk from the cow, fresh eggs, real churned butter, fresh homemade biscuits. The days before processed food took over our lives. I grew up eating that way, and my mother also lived to be 2 months short of 91. Then suddenly in March, I hit a brick wall. I had grown lazy and more complacent in my eating habits after 30-something years as a pescatarian, eating balanced meals along with vegetables and fruits. I had started eating meat again, frequently skipped meals, lived off of sandwiches and trail mix, and consumed way too much alcohol. I joked with my friends that I was practicing to become an alcoholic. Turned out not to be so funny. I realized that when my doctor asked me once if I was still drinking excessively. What? Turns out I was simply lubricating my depression. Now, after my heart attack, I'm faced with a low sodium, low fat, low carbohydrate diet that I don't take lightly. My cardiologist, there's a phrase I never thought I'd say, my cardiologist, told me the number one enemy of my heart is alcohol. I am now the designated driver. I long ago eliminated most sugar and added salt from my diet, so that hasn't been too difficult. What I'm having to reteach myself from my younger idealistic days is that eating healthy isn't simply avoiding meat, but approaching life and health holistically through what I take into my body. Diet in this way becomes as much an expression of spirituality as attending worship services, walking in the woods, writing poetry, or prayer. If it is true physically that you are what you eat, is it not just as true emotionally, psychologically, or spiritually? It's a wonderful mantra. It reminds us that true faith is practice. Religion is faithfulness to our principles, beliefs, ideals. Our faith tradition is an invitation to give up our comfortable habits as we outgrow them. It is an invitation to challenge one another and ourselves in a spirit of trust and respect. Our religious tent shelters Christians and Buddhists, spiritualists and humanists, activists and meditators. Isn't it great to share a faith that we can pick and choose and customize to fit our appetites and needs like a healthy diet? I give thanks that our church is a presence in this community, and that our association of congregations places itself on the cutting edge of social and ethical issues. I celebrate that we attempt to walk the path of love and tolerance and deeper understanding that the great progenitors of all the world's religions taught. Organic faith. I have an abundant supply of cookbooks. Some of them are standard issue. How to make bread, how to cook seafood, pressure cooking, and crock potting. But the ones that I like best are the ones that read like spiritual or philosophical texts. The Enchanted Broccoli Forest, The Garden of Vegan, Food for the Spirit. My former wife, Kathy, has a book on nutrition that begins by quoting Socrates. There is only one good, knowledge, and one evil, ignorance. But my favorite cookbook of all time is this one, More with Less Cookbook. Suggestions by Mennonites on how to eat better and consume less of the world's limited resources. Written by Doris Jansen Longacre, the book covers 50 pages before it offers a single recipe, with chapter titles such as Change, an Act of Faith, Building a Simpler Diet, and eat with joy. Presenting the central theme of her book, Doris says, there is a way of wasting less, eating less, and spending less, which gives not less, but more. This book is not about cutting back, she says. This book is about living joyfully, richly, and creatively. Heady claims for a cookbook, but I have kept and used my copy for more than 40 years. Still available, new or used, the book has gone through several editions. Torn cover, dog-eared and stained, but this book introduced me to tabbouleh, baking homemade bread from scratch. And the dish I made today, for the first time, Caribbean rice and beans. In the introduction to her book, The Healthy Kitchen, Rosie Daly reminds us that eating well is not about dieting, but a life choice. Adopting a healthy lifestyle through food should never leave us feeling deprived. Eating, she said, is one of life's great pleasures. Amen? But nothing good is easy, is it? That is the truth of wisdom, whether our subject is religion or nutrition. People say they don't eat organically or buy health foods because it costs too much. And it often does. But I remind myself it costs too much to go to church also, if my aim is to cut corners and save money. I think the larger truth has to do with a sense of disconnect in our busy and challenging lives. The compartmentalization of society brings with it a disintegration of values. Our focal points are scattered, our attentions are divided, and the things we do don't seem to be connected to one another. For me, religion or spirituality is about reintegrating the pieces of my life. A life of integrity is a life of wholeness whose pieces are defined by a common virtue or faith or set of principles. Kathy and I used to serve as volunteers for the Omega Institute for Holistic Studies based in New York. They invited Jane Goodall to one of their very expensive weekend programs. She stole the show. Jane explained in a presentation how she often would attend such programs where she would find spread before her sumptuous meals. She went through line and chose an apple for her lunch, explaining to her distraught hosts and hostesses that it was sufficient for her simple diet, and she could not in good conscience indulge the abundance spread before her while so many starve around the world that she knows so well. This is what I mean by an integrated life. This is what the author means by more with less. In the margins of her book, we find familiar teachings and new ones from around the world. From the book of Proverbs in the Bible. One who is full tramples on honey, but to the soul who is hungry, any bitter thing is sweet. and a Creole proverb. A full stomach says a ripe guava has worms. An empty stomach says, let me see. It reminds me of being on a cruise ship in the ocean, surrounded by people from countries rich and poor, serving our every want, working non-stop for months at a time with a smiling countenance, and often sending the money home to loved ones. Our privilege has a worldwide impact, for better or for worse. We don't have to starve ourselves to understand that everything we do is a statement of faith. Even the affluent Omega Institute teaches that the well-being of every individual is deeply connected to the well-being of all living things. Farmer, writer, and photographer Michael Abelman took a summer off from 30 years of farming to travel the United States in a beat-up Volkswagen with his son and chronicle the lives of local farmers. In his book, Fields of Plenty, he writes that growing and eating food are sacred acts. Abelman has been farming organically since the early 1970s, supports local farms, urban reclamation, and community building. He founded a charity called Cultivate Canada in Vancouver and runs the Center for Arts, Ecology, and Agriculture from his family farm in British Columbia. In a recent blog called Street Farm, Michael wrote about his soul food, and that's S-O-L-E, soul food street farm, one of many urban sites he has reclaimed. This one located in one of the most infamous neighborhoods in the world, Vancouver's downtown East Side, home of the term Skid Row. Ours, he said, is the poorest postal code in the country and holds the dubious distinction of having the highest rates of HIV and hepatitis C per capita in North America. There are more drug-related deaths there than anywhere else on our continent. All of this squalor, he points out, exists in the heart of what is considered North America's most expensive city. This is what I mean by the disintegration of values. Michael Abelman, I think, would agree. Industrialized food is no better than industrialized faith. And that location is where he has chosen to demonstrate that growing and eating are sacred acts. Reading stories like this one gives me hope. It just may be possible that we come to prefer our food supply like we do our religion, small and local, in the hands of people that we know personally, who earn our trust. Not only will I pay more for organic food, but I will pay more if necessary to buy it directly from the farmers and small cooperatives as an assurance they are receiving fair wages for an honest, wholesome product that is kind to the environment. As the Swami Saraswatiji is fond of saying, come to nature, be with nature, and change your nature.